Hi, welcome to the third episode of the KieLive series. Our goal is to bring technical information about projects under the Key umbrella, like Drules, JBPM, Octoplanner, and today we are talking about Kogito. I am Karina Varela and I'll be your host today. That being said, I'd like to welcome to stage Duncan Doyle. He's a specialist in business automation and a guru of Kogito technologies. Hi, Duncan. Welcome and thank you for accepting the invite.
Hi, Karina. Hi, Karina. Always happy to help. Always happy to help. Guru, eh?
A
So,
guru, yeah.
thanks for putting that pressure on my shoulder. Much appreciated.
So, could you give us a brief summary of the talk you are going to bring today for our participants?
Yeah. Today, what we're going to do is we're going to look at basically the programming model around Cogito and see what kind of things you, as a developer, can do with the platform, how it helps you develop business applications, decisions, and rules. Things like live coding, hot reload, and hopefully we'll get it to run on OpenShift as well. But for that, I need to
Woo!
have people light candles and pray a bit to the demo gods.
Live demos are always exciting.
No, they're
And
scary.
are you bringing Cogito on Quarkus today?
Yeah, it's going to be Cogito and Quarkus. Yes.
That is lovely. So we'll hand it over to you. I'll be here taking the questions from the audience and stopping you, interrupting you whenever a question comes up.
Like you always do, of course. Like
Good
you always do.
presentation, Duncan.
Yeah, thanks so much, Karina. Okay, let's put this into present mode. Hi all. As Karina said, my name is Duncan. I work for Red Hat. I'm the technical marketing manager of the business automation portfolio. I've been around at Red Hat for about 10 years in various roles. I've got a very technical background. I used to be a consultant and an architect in the Europe and Middle East region. But the last 4 years, I've been part of the business unit. Still trying to develop a bit upstream here and there when I've got a spare moment. Unfortunately, I don't have enough time to do it. So today we're going to look a bit at Cogito. Basically, we're going to look at how to start a project from scratch. Look at things like live coding, hot reload, integration with things like CDI, and other frameworks to show you a bit how you can quickly develop microservices and decision and process-based, workflow-based microservices applications for cloud. So for the people that don't know what Cogito is, a brief introduction. Cogito is basically our next generation cloud native business automation platform. It's not a completely new code base. It's a new project, but it's not a new code base. It's been built on top of proven technologies like Drules for rules and decisions, and JBPM for processes, workflows, case management, and the likes, and Octoplanner for business resource optimization. What we tend to do with Cogito, what basically our mission is to bring all that known technology and these platforms that have proven themselves in mission critical applications, and adapt them and change them and alter them in such a way that we become a better fit for cloud. So that means lower resource utilization, faster startup times, compatibility and integration with the best of breed technologies around cloud for monitoring, management, serverless, native compilation, and the likes. So that's in a nutshell is what Cogito is. Also for the people that are new, we have had a Jira for this. Why is your logo a pirate and why is the pirate winking? It's not a pirate, it's a Viking, and the pirate, the Viking, is not winking. He's missing an eye. It's
He's
actually
not winking.
He's not. He's missing an eye. It's more brutal indeed than a nice a wink. No, he's missing an eye. It's Odin who gave away his eye for wisdom. So there's actually been some thought behind the logo, and he's got a cool blue beard. Good. So first of all, supported runtimes for Cogito. I think that's important. When you talk about cloud, especially from a Java point of view, basically there's a large ecosystem around Spring Boot for cloud native application development. So one of the runtimes that we support is Spring Boot. The other one, obviously being a Red Hat project, is Quarkus. And we're going to look at Quarkus today to show you how the integration or how building business applications or business microservices on top of Quarkus can be done, utilizing the skills that you know from from Java, and making it easy to integrate with other services and platforms that Quarkus provides. So one of the key foundations for Cogito is developer power, and that's what this talk is going to be about. So what we're going to show is things like instant developer efficiency, tooling that we have developed for Visual Studio Code, a part of the code generation that allows developers, but also business users, to create microservices quickly from simply using business assets like DMN decisions and BPMN files. Really moving or trying to generate as much code as possible, so you don't have to deal with the plumbing and can focus on the actual value that your application has to deliver. And we're, as I said, hopefully we're going to see a bit of OpenShift. That would be kind of cool if we can get this to run in containers. So I'm going to switch a bit between slides and live coding. Live coding is always a bit of a journey, a challenge. So I hope everything works. I've got a bit of a cheat sheet, so we'll see where we get at. So first of all, to bootstrap a Cogito project, we provide an archetype both for Quarkus and Spring Boot. So in this demo, we're going to use the archetype for Quarkus to actually bootstrap a new application. So I hope that Karina will interrupt me if you can't really. I'll beef this up a bit. You can see my screen and my my terminal, and I'll switch here quickly as well. Oh, shouldn't be doing that. Sorry about that.
Before you start, people are already curious, and I think you will get to it. But will you do any native, and will it be with Graal or Mandrel?
I didn't do any native prep. We can do native. Why not? Let's be brave, right? We can do native. So I wasn't planning on doing anything native, but we can definitely give that a go.
With Graal?
Yeah, I still have Graal installed, and basically Mandrel is a downstream of Graal VM. So at the moment, yeah, I still got Graal VM. I think 20 something installed. Well, we could check. I'm not sure which one I have. Yeah, it's Graal 21 to JDK 11.
Perfect.
But
thank you.
I need to move to Mandrel. That is correct, which is the Red Hat downstream build of Graal. So what we can do is we can use this archetype to basically bootstrap a Cogito application. So we'll use our Maven archetype to build a new project. And we can then open that project in something like Visual Studio Code. As I said, we actually recently published our editors, our tooling for Cogito to the Visual Studio Code Marketplace. So if you want to install the tooling that I'm using today, simply you can go to Preferences and you can go to Extensions, and there will be a BPMN editor. Actually, we have an entire package for this that installs the BPMN editor for you and the DMN editor, which gives you cool capabilities, because what I can do now in this application is that you can see it's a standard Maven application with a POM file. It's got a source main Java and a source main resources directory, standard test that we provide out of the box. And one of the things that we provide with this application is a BPMN2 file, so business process model annotation file, with a simple process that will basically send a hello world message. So we start the process. This is a start event, an end event, and a task event, in this case a script task, which will simply print out system out print line hello world. We'll get back to this later in the demo, but I just wanted to show you first how we can bootstrap an application like this using our Maven archetype.
And especially about this archetype, I see you started the project with the Cogito archetype. So people are asking if there's a way to start without CLIs. And we can actually use the IDE to create a Quarkus project, but we would be using the Quarkus archetype. So how does that work?
Yeah, you can do it with the Quarkus extension as well. That's possible. The reason I'm using the Cogito archetype here is because it gives me the process definition and those things out of the box. When you use the Quarkus archetype, you'll get a Quarkus application with the Cogito extension in it and enabled in it. So it's both is possible actually.
Perfect. Thank you, Duncan.
So switching back to the slides, and I'll keep it in this mode, it's easier. Um, I showed you the IDE extension, right? So there's an IDE extension that supports BPMN and DMN files, and we've seen an example of the BPMN file. What's nice about that is that because we're developing microservices, we don't have to switch to any other external tool or an external platform to build our BPM model and then go back and forth when we really want to implement the execution semantics in Java, like our services, our integrations, and so forth. We can basically stay in the same IDE. We can use the tools that we like and that we know. We can use the Git extensions from VS Code. You can use your command line tools like you're used to, but we provide that editor for you in Visual Studio Code to graphically build those models. Another really nice thing about Cogito is that, as I said earlier, we want to move away from what we want to provide is not only a platform in which you can develop your decision models, but where by analyzing those models and by introspecting that models, we can generate actual code and microservices or RESTful APIs in this case for your application. So I'll give you a quick demonstration of that. So this is another project also in VS Code that I prepared earlier. It's a very simple project. It's a very simple DMN project. Basically what it does, it gets two inputs, a status, which is a string, and a price, which is a number, and then it calculates the amount of air miles that you get for your flight. Obviously, the last 4 months, I've not been anywhere close to an airplane, but it's just to keep me sort of in touch with the airline industry, I'd say. So if you look at this project, and if you look at the code, there's nothing there actually. There's an air miles DMN file, and there is an application properties, which some very simple properties. Here it's only 3. So that's all I have. I don't have any Java code. I don't have any JAX-RS implementation. Don't have any Spring MVC things, nothing. Obviously, I prepared this earlier. I did a Maven clean package earlier, but what we can do now is that we can start this. Now let's run it in dev mode. That's a lot more fun. Clean compile Quarkus dev. So what we will do now is we will compile our application. What Cogito will do is Cogito has a number of code generators under the covers, and it will, during compile time, it will inspect or introspect your business assets, so to say. So your DMN models, your BPMN models, if you have them, your Java code, if you're using drules, your DRLs, your rule units, and from that, those assets, from those files, it can find information, it can infer information from which we can generate a service. So what you'll see now, if we go back to a browser and we go to localhost 8080, well, not that one, we go to the Swagger UI, you can see that there is a REST service running there with a endpoint called air miles, and this is generated from basically that DMN file here. I don't have any JAX-RS code. I've got nothing here. If you look at under the covers, what happens is that we generate from this file, we can generate a JAX-RS. In this case, in the Spring world, we generate a Spring native implementation. But in this case, we generate a JAX-RS resource that provides that endpoint for us. And we provide a number of methods, in this case, a post method, to actually execute our DMN model like so. So no code, no nothing, just a model, package it up, deploy it, and you've got a microservice running that that exposes your decisions basically as a service.
So linked to this demo that you just did, Duncan, I
Yes.
have a question here from Karsten. So is there any mechanism scaffolding underlying services based on a previously designed BPMN model? following a model-first approach?
Okay, I need to read that question again.
Yeah,
Sorry
it's on
about that.
StreamYard. It's on StreamYard in
Yeah,
the
yeah.
document.
Is there any mechanism scaffolding underlying service based on it? I don't really understand the question, to be honest. But
Understand?
that's
Please
no,
rephrase,
no, no,
and we'll
no, no.
move on, and then we can come back.
I don't understand what you mean with previously designed BPMN model. So with the BPMN model, also we do the same kind of code generation. I will show that later as well.
Scaffolding, right? This is not considered scaffolding. This is code
Yeah,
generation.
yeah, exactly. Well, we have a scaffolding mechanism underneath that we're developing now for people that want to adapt the RESTful API or the APIs that we expose through our application. So, say for example that you want to expose your microservice using a different RESTful API because of your standards within your organization or what have you. Then we're now working on a mechanism to scaffold the code and then allow you to implement your own RESTful API on top of the generated code that then interacts with the decision engine.
Okay, thank you, Duncan.
Welcome. Good. So yeah, this basically generates that air miles application, and we can then, let's see, we've got an example here. We can then do a RESTful call. So this is to localhost 8080 air miles, and we can, well, let's give this another price. We can send that some data just to show you that works nicely, and we get the number of air miles back, which is 960. And that's basically because we have a decision here in our table that says if the amount is below 1,000 and we're status gold, then we do the price times 1.2. Super simple example, but it proves the point of code generation and not really needing any code to expose your model as a microservice. Good. So let's go back and let's look at something else. Also introspection with code generation, but now for a concept that we call rule units. For the people that know Drools and DRL from the past, from the version 7 series, there's a new API, a new way of interacting and writing your rules and interacting with your rules, which is called rule units. And also this has full support for code generation. So I've got another example here. Let's start that one up. Let's beef that up a bit. Like so. And Kogito rule units, that one. So that starts another VS Code. And what we have here, it's a standard, well, a Kogito rules application. Very simple example. Again, we're not going to make it too difficult. But what this service does, it has a person class with a name, an age, and we're going to determine whether somebody is an adult or not. Very simple. So we've got a DRL file here, which basically says from the data source persons, and we'll get to what a data source is in your rule unit terminology in a second. For persons with an age that's greater or equal to 18, we modify the fact we set adult to true, and then we've got a query, and this part is important. We've got a query that then gets all the persons that are defined as an adult by this specific unit, this specific rule. And then the third component that we have is the thing that ties it together. Actually, if you look here, you can already see it. See, there's a definition of a unit here called person unit. And what ties it together is the rule unit data implementation, which basically defines where or the data stores or the data sources actually for your unit. So that defines where your facts, where your data comes from. And in this case, we defined a data store. This could also be a stream if you've got a streaming use case. But in this case, it's a store to which we can add persons as facts, and then we execute the rule unit, and we get the data back from the query. Now, the way this works is that our data sources are from what we generate our input API. So the input request that we send to our microservice is defined by the data stores or the data sources that you use. The output, the actual RESTful resource that we will expose is based on the query that we've defined here. One of the things I need to do is I need to switch off that one, otherwise it won't work. So let's give that a go as well. We run that in Quarkus dev mode as well. And the reason it takes a while to start up, by the way, is because I'm using master. So this is the snapshot version. So it's going to check every time that I run whether there is a new version of that specific snapshot. If you run final versions, you don't get through the Maven wants to download the whole internet story. So we'll let that run. We're going back to Chrome here, and we'll see if we've got an endpoint here. It should be available. And there we go. See, it generates an endpoint based here on that data that we've basically based on our query. So we can go back to our Postman here and say that I add a person or a number of persons, an array of persons, in this case only myself, and say that I am still 18, I wish, and we send that data to our service. Oh, that's interesting. That's the demo gods. Oh, I know what it is. It's that one. That's the one. Good. So it comes back with an answer. Basically, what happened is that I did a little test earlier and with a surname field, and that was no longer in my model. So it sends back, yes, Duncan is an adult because his age is 18. We can check when we go 17. The rule doesn't fire, so I'm not an adult, and so forth. What's cool about Kogito, and then we get into another bit of the developer joy, is one of the things that you would like to do quickly and swiftly is that whenever you change something in your application, you want to be able to test that as quick as possible, actually. In the previous versions of our app, our platform, but also in standard Java applications, whenever you make a change to your code, you need to save your file, you need to compile your application, you need to start it up, and only then you can actually test the whole end-to-end of that application. Kogito, well, actually, Quarkus provides a concept called hot reload. And that's why we're actually running this in Quarkus dev mode. So it says here live coding activated. What Kogito adds on top of Quarkus here is that it allows to do live coding against business assets. So basically against Kogito resources like DRL files, like BPMN files and DMN files. And what that means is that whenever you make a change in one of those assets, whenever you change a rule, you don't need to recompile. You don't need to recompile, stop your application, recompile it, package it, start it again. In previous versions of Decision Manager, you would have to deploy it on an execution server. And the round trip time between actually changing a rule and testing whether that change was effective could very well be a minute or more. In Kogito, what we can do, let's see, this was, what did we say, 18 here. Say that the legal adult age in our country is not 18, but 21. We can simply change that rule, and then we can send that request again. And what we'll see is that all of a sudden the result is empty because I'm no longer an adult. What we also saw is that underneath, Quarkus and Kogito do a hot replace of that actual code, in this case in 1.6 seconds. So my round trip is decreased from a minute to 1.6 seconds when I want to change a rule, when I want to change the semantics of my application. And we can show that it actually works, that we're not cheating. We can set my age to, well, let's do my actual age then, 41. There
your age live.
Yeah, of course. I don't care, man. Wisdom comes with ages. That's at least that's what I always tell myself. I'm not sure if that's true, but you can see that it now works again. And if we then set the age to 42, which is why I said 41, because 42 is the answer to everything in the universe. Being on a techie talk here, there we go, and we can see that that works again with the live and hot reload. So that feature is really, really powerful. It's not only doesn't only work for rules, it works for DMN files, it works for BPMN files, all these kind of things, and it really, really speeds up your development time. Really powerful feature.
We are looking forward for the processes.
Yeah. You're a process girl, right? So there we go.
Also,
I know.
Our participants are asking questions about it. So I will just bring this question. So
Okay, shoot.
can we implement custom work item handlers on Cogito? Is there this
Oh,
concept of a work
well,
item
we're
handler?
not we're not there. We're not there yet. Come
Me,
on,
right? So
come
I'm
on.
anxious.
I'm not gonna do a custom work on that item handler. I'm actually gonna do something that I think is kind of cool. That, well, yes, we're implementing custom work item handlers as well. But I think this part of the story is actually maybe even more interesting if you look at it from a Java development
Mm,
perspective. So we've had a hot reload. So let's go back to the processes then. People seem to like that, so we're going to close that one. I don't think we need this one anymore, so we can switch that one, shut that one down. No, we don't want to save that. Good. So processes, cool. So same thing here. Well, let's be brave and let's start that in Quarkus dev mode as well. There we go. So here the same thing happens, right? So we are introspecting the BPMN file. From the BPMN file, we know that there's a start event, there's an end event, there's a script task. So we go generate the APIs to interact with this process. What I won't show today, but what is a really cool feature is that if you change this to a message start event and you provide a bit of configuration in the application properties file, you can automatically generate the code to connect to in this default case to Kafka. So also all that code that basically that plumbing code you no longer need to write yourself, which again speeds up a lot of time, and it's standard, also creates like a standard way of interacting with all these various subsystems and infrastructure parts that we need for our platform. So let's go here again. And as you can see, we've got a new API which says greetings. So let's give that a go. So we're going to try that out. We don't have any input variables or output variables defined for a process definition, so we can leave the request empty. We can execute that. We get a response with the process instance ID here. And we can see in the output here that it says hello world. The reason it says hello world is because we have a script task that says hello world. Now, let's see if we can do something cooler. So we're gonna implement a hello service.java. And that's gonna be a class. Oh, no, it's just gonna be a class. Sorry. And we're gonna give that a method called hello. And then we're going to say string hello. And there's a reason why I do this. I know that I can immediately do the return. Then we do system out print line hello. And then we're going to return that as well. As you can see, I'm a pro in writing very complicated business logic. So what we're going to do now, what's cool about Kogito is that because we can introspect so much and because we focus on two runtimes, Quarkus and Spring Boot, we can now start utilizing all these cool Java and Java EE technologies like CDI and the likes to implement the actual logic behind our processes. So in the past, you sort of had to use work item handlers. There was a things where we used reflection and the likes, but there's always this limitation that there's a lot of cool stuff out there that I want to utilize with CDI. For example, if I want to access a database, maybe I just want to inject an entity manager somewhere. You want to use some JPA, right? If I'm in an old school RDBMS world, or if I want to use Camel, I would just want to inject a producer template and start using Apache Camel. And in the past, you had to write quite some code and you had to package it up, and it had to be available as a jar file. You need to import that, and you need to configure work item handlers and all this sort of stuff that really didn't add to the value you wanted to provide to your application semantically. What we can do in Kogito is that we basically define that as an application scope CDI bean. Okay, that's good. And what we can do is we can change this this script task here and turn it into a service task. And we say that we want to have a Java implementation, and we just specify the service interface here. So, well, in this case, it's also the implementation and the operation that we want to call. So I think that was called hello, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, it's called hello. So we've got hot replace here, hot reload. So this should say hello. Let's do that hello world in lowercase. This was hello world in uppercase. And let's again fire that request. So we're going to execute the same thing. And if we look now, we see hello world. And the reason we see hello world is because this now is executing this application scope CDI bean. And to prove that we're no longer in that script task, we're gonna do something for our Italian friends. So we can say ciao mondo, and we execute again. And there we go. So within a minute, I've implemented a CDI bean that I can now directly utilize from my process. What the other thing that is cool is that I can't only use it like this. I also can pass it variables, get results back, and so forth, which basically allows me to now start utilizing it for more complex stuff as well. So, say for example that we want to pass it a variable, right? So let's adapt this method, and we're gonna say string name, and we're gonna concatenate that here, like so. And then we want to have a process variable here. And we are going to add a name. Oh, sorry. Name string. So what a process variable does basically is define the variables that the process can accept as input or provide as output. You can tag those variables, whether they're input only, output only, internal private variables that you only want to use in your process. We use again that information for code generation. But what we can do now is we can pass that variable to our CDI bean. So we're going to say, well, the actual variable here is name, we're going to string, the source is name, and we want the output as well because we're returning that thing as well, and that has to be results. So that's a result. It's going to be a string, and we want to map that back. Okay, cool. So now we can actually alter our request here and say that we want to provide a name to our process as input variable, and let's use my name. Good. And now we want to execute that. And now we can see that not only do we pass the name to our implementation here, right? My name here, but I concatenate that to Chamondo, and I return that value. And what we see is because we have not tagged this variable for either input or output, it becomes an input and an output variable of the process. So we can see that the response body of that process actually is that concatenated string. So this was a thing that was hard to do in JBPM 7, so in the previous version, where you would start a process and you would get the process instance back, but not any of the variables. And that made it sometimes a bit hard to use BPMN technology for things like straight-through processing or microservices orchestration, where you basically want to send a request, have the process orchestrate the workflow between the microservices, maybe some human tasks if you don't have straight-through processing, and then you want to get the response back. And that was hard to do in 7 and in earlier versions. In Kogito, that's like the default way of doing things. You send data and you get data back, and you can define what kind of data that is based on the tags that you provide. What we also can show is that when we go back to that Swagger UI, is that the actual definition here of that API is changed because I've now introduced that process variable in my process definition. And because we introspect those files, we know what that variable needs to be, we know its type, so we can provide that as a sample input. Also, a difference with what we used to do, where everything was very generic and we had a map of string objects that would go in. So the consumption of the API would be a bit more difficult. You really had to know what kind of request you had to send. Because we can now introspect all this stuff, and this is a super simple example, but this works with more with actual Java objects and more complex objects as well, is that you now can provide the full API. If you want to start this process, this is what you need to send. which makes consumption of the services a lot easier. The other thing that it helps to do is if you look in a microservices world and you look at things like API management, right? API management is all about exposing domain-specific APIs or APIs in a business context. You don't expose an API for a service that says start process map string object. That in a business context that makes like no sense at all. If you look at Kogito, we generate the endpoint based on the name of the BPMN file, and we introspect and we generate the API, the input and the output based on the actual data. So now we can actually expose business focus and business context APIs from these services, which again is it's just a lot better fit for a cloud native world and an API managed world.
So this is all brilliant. I'm loving the presentation. I just would like to tell you that we only have 9 minutes left.
Okay, then we're gonna do something cool. Let's see if we can make that work in 9 minutes. So one of the things that we can also do is let's start a service here. So I have a little service here, and that's the cool thing if you got stuff prepared. That simply does a greeting here, which says, well, it's actually in Dutch. I'm not going to pronounce it; that will confuse people. But it says "Hello World" in Dutch. What we want to do is, because we're talking about microservices orchestration, we actually want to use this kind of technology to start. Where are we? To start orchestrating our services here as well. So what I want to show, and I'm going to cheat a bit because I always forget these commands here. What I want to show is that you can actually start using things like Apache Camel from within your BPMN application. So what I'm doing here is I'm basically adding a Quarkus extension for Camel to my application. And I need to do a little trick here to because it doesn't. This is going to be fixed in a later version, by the way, because it doesn't provide the version in the BOM file that we have. And we've got Camel here version like so. Okay. So we've got Apache Camel now here in our dependencies, which is cool. What we can now do is we'll add a new folder and we call that Camel. And what we're going to implement is a Camel route builder, basically. And then I need to remember what I called that thing. Camel route builder. Cool. New file. New file. Camel route builder. .java. So this is something I prepared earlier. So what's cool about this is that because there's a package thing there. Because I add the Quarkus extension for Camel, I can now start combining all these technologies together. So I've got BPMN for my workflow definition and for my business process definition, but I want to use an integration framework for integrating with microservices, for example, to do a REST call or to do a transformation, data transformation, or to do a split patterns and all that kind of stuff. And I want to use that in the same application, and that's the power that Quarkus basically provides. So I'm going to cheat again here. Let's see if I've got that here. So what we can do is we can alter this implementation of our hello service like so. So what we now actually are doing is we're saying, well, we want to inject in our CDI bean a Fluent producer template from Camel that produces something to direct hello. Direct hello actually sends consumes from here, then it logs a log line, and it uses the Camel syntax to build a route that does a get to my other microservice. One thing that I still need to provide is the actual URL. So we can see that there is a config property here, camel greeting URL. I simply need to add that to my application.properties here. And that's running on 8090. We can quickly check that. That's actually running, localhost 8090 Swagger. There we go. And there's a service running there. That's great. Now we can start our application here as well. If everything wants to compile, I hope so. Fingers crossed. So what we're doing, we have a camel route that we've defined here using the camel DSL. We defined it as an application scope bean. It provides, it produces, it reads from an endpoint called direct hello, which is an in-memory call. In our service that we're using as a CDI bean in our service task, we now inject a camel producer that sends a message to that endpoint and then gets the response back and sends that response back to the actual maps that back to the process variable. So let's see if that works. So we're going back to our Swagger UI here, like so. We got greetings here. We're going to try it out. We're going to say name here. And we're going to say execute. And we see here that it says, Hallo wereld, in Dutch, hello world. So what we see is that we're actually using a business process defined in BPMN2 that uses a CDI bean or uses a service task that's backed by a CDI bean that gets a camel integration pattern injected into it and uses camel to call another Quarkus service that basically provides me the hello string. And to prove that it's actually working, we can say ciao Karina, because that is also running in Quarkus dev mode. So if everything works, it now says ciao Karina.
Nice. That's awesome. Will people be able to access this code on GitHub?
If I spend a bit more time on this, well, what we have is we have the key learning repository on GitHub, and there is actually a 5-module course around Kogito in there. That includes the air miles example. It includes the DRL example. It also includes an example using Apache Camel, which is I basically based this coding session on that content. It also explains how to install the editors, what kind of JVM you need to have, and so forth. So it also does things like native image compilation there.
That is awesome. I have a question that was asked on the beginning of the live that you might be able to answer on these last minutes.
Okay.
So this is a tricky one. What is the easiest way to deploy tiny Kogito project in production?
Tiny Kogito project, yeah. We should have had 5 minutes more. The easiest way for me is using the Kogito CLI and OpenShift. So that was the last part that I wanted to show. Unfortunately, we don't have enough time to do that. But with the Kogito CLI, I can basically in one. So the Kogito CLI is a CLI that allows me to interact with OpenShift to create a Kogito project, and it installs for you the Kogito operator. So when I then deploy a service and I say Kogito deploy service, I give it a name, the operator takes care of provisioning the build infrastructure, the deployment configuration, the routes, the services, and so forth. Then I can compile the project locally, and I can do a binary build and send that to the build configuration defined by the operator. So it's literally 3-4 commands, and you've got it running in a container on an OpenShift environment.
That is awesome. And also, it's also important to share that the Key team is also working on supporting Kubernetes. So vanilla Kubernetes or OpenShift, right?
Correct.
Nice, Duncan. So thank you, Duncan, for the demo.
You're welcome.
After the presentation, I'll grab the slides so we can share with the folks who are watching. Okay, and I think we don't have any more questions here. If you need to contact Duncan, let me share his Twitter. It's Duncan Doyle, right?
I'm happy you didn't say phone number, but yeah. Yeah, it's at Duncan Doyle. It's correct.
Yes, so you can contact him, you can contact me. Feel free to get in touch with us via the Key Zulip chat, because like this one is better actually, the Zulip chat,
Yeah.
and here Zulip, here it is. This will be quick. Okay, here you go. So you can find us, and all the Key team is there too to help you with your questions and any other issues you might face. So thank you, Duncan. Thank you who's
Thank
watching
you,
us
Karina,
now.
again for hosting.
Sure. Have a nice day. See you next week. Bye bye.